blown away. If I had two words to describe this trial, I did do part one, which was I had been analyzing trail cameras for 17 evenings from 4 to 6 p.m. And that came out to be around 13 to 15, let's say. So I think it came out 14 and a half. Antlerless deer and a few bucks, obviously, per evening. So I know that there's been a ton of really good drone data out there. So I said, okay, well, let's take that number on 400 acres and let's multiply it by 2, right? Deer are in bedding areas, deer are in native browse areas, deer are eating acorns, and what is that number, right? So let's say that puts me up to around 30 does, and then obviously we can say if the ratio is 1 to 2, that's $15, right? So maybe around 40 to 50 deer on 400 acres, which if you extrapolate that out to a square mile basis, that's a relatively good deer density. I wanted to do all of that leading up to knowing I was going to have a drone flight occur in mid-January, which just happened a few days ago, and I finally have all the data and was able to go through it, and I'm absolutely blown away at what it found. So I want to first start this by saying that this is very specific to this farm. So somebody else may or may not decide to harvest does based on other data points. I like to look at it from a habitat perspective. I would like to look at it at a food plot perspective. I look at it at a hunting observation perspective, trail observation perspective, and now we've added this last element in, or also talk with neighbors, kind of see what their harvest strategy is, and then lastly, with this new technology, we can add in drone surveys, which I think is really critical. What they ended up finding on my 400 acres here is that they actually were able to locate 85 deer. Which is pretty incredible. So this was done in the morning. It was done, I think, from 7:30, I think my time's right, till about 9 a.m., 9:30 maybe. And it was kind of a rainy, overcast day. Temperatures were around mid-40s, so there could be a potential argument for them missing some deer, depending on where those deer were at, if they were in really tight thickets, holding tight, even with the thermal studies or thermal drone cameras. I have heard of that their coverage rate or identification rate is not 100%, which, what is? So if anything, this is likely on the lower end and not likely on the higher end. They did make sure to map it for me, so I do know that there's no double counting or anything like that. But nonetheless, let's use that 85 number. Of that, 71 were antlerless. Now, people are going to go, whoa, that ratio is out of control. But you have to remember, of those antlerless, you have button bucks. But even if we said 50% of the antlerless were button bucks and say young buck spikes that were unidentifiable from the drone, that would still put the total deer density at a very high level. And I actually ran the numbers here. Even under that super conservative assumption, that still has like 25 to 30 breedable adult does in the middle of December, right? Our season in Ohio is actually still open for about another 3 weeks. But most of the harvest is complete for 2025-26 season. So you have 25 to 30 breedable does, most of which I would assume are bred. Probably 80 to 90% of those are bred. I've also noticed fawns breeding on our farm over the last almost 20 years that we've owned it, just due to all the habitat, all the food plots we have. They can get up to that 70-pound weight where they come into estrus this time of year. I've actually had some bucks chasing some of those on camera. But I'm not even accounting for those. So just the adult does, assuming 50% were young bucks and button bucks as far as the antlerless doe, that's 25 to 30 adult does that are either bred or capable of being bred. Using really conservative recruitment rates. So that should put up my female base would still produce next year roughly 13 to 25 fawns going into next fall. Which is obviously a huge jump in overall number of deer. Again, some of those would be button bucks. Some of the button bucks that are there now will get displaced. Some will stay depending on if their doe was harvested or not. But again, we're using the most conservative numbers here. What I did notice is that a lot of the doe groups were dominating some of the prime bedding areas. A lot of the bucks were actually kind of in areas that were on ridges, which we notice a lot in this part of the country. but then also they were quite a bit of ways away from the deer, or from the does, excuse me, anywhere from 100 yards all the way to half a mile from where there were some pretty large doe groups. Also, another thing that I think really was interesting in this study is, you see like 3 to 6 does in a group, and I think that's a lot of times what we see observationally on a trail camera or observationally hunting. You see 3 or 4 deer come into a field and they kind of work their way through, they eat and they go on, and then you might see 3 or 4 more come in. I think we just naturally kind of assume that, oh, those are probably the same ones. They just circled back, right? Or similar with trail cameras, we would make that observation. What the drone survey really highlighted to me, and again, this was way more deer than I was thinking, and I thought we had a high deer density, and this was just my property, and I know there's some really substantial bedding surrounding the farm. And what this really highlighted to me, though, was how often there would be a group of 3 to 6, and then maybe 50, 60 yards away, there's a little terrain feature or something like that, and there'd be another group of 3 to 4. And then you go another 70, 80 yards, maybe 120 yards, somewhere in that range, and there'd be another group of 6. So on a 100-acre block, you might all of a sudden have 15, 20 individual antlerless deer. And from a hunting observation perspective, you might have thought that was 3. Obviously, this is one farm in heavy timber country, so this is not to be used across the board. We don't want to say absolutes. Everywhere needs to harvest does or doesn't need to harvest does. But I can tell you, we had a little bit of a rougher season. We did harvest around 5 or 6 does. I have to go back and look for sure between a few different guys, which was pretty telling considering how high the numbers still are. And I just wanted to highlight all of this because I think that I'm a pretty analytical person, and even with all of that, the trail camera data, running 20-some trail cameras, I think that's about what it is, was significantly off. Despite my best efforts in trying to even, rationalize the number of deer, extrapolate it out, etc., I was way off. And I think this happens a lot. We only use our hunting observations or our trail cameras, and it's not saying trail cameras aren't a good tool, but I think I just was blown away at the overall density, and obviously that's going to continue to creep up unless disease or we change harvest protocol on this particular piece next year. So what are we going to do? We're going to continue to analyze over the spring and summer. We're going to get all our Nitro Boost Vitalized seed food plots planted. We're going to increase our Vitalized clover plots planting. We're going to heavily increase timber harvest, potentially sell some timber this year. I'm going to have a call that might line something up there to harvest some timber. And then also do a lot of our equip programs, which is going to include a lot of timber cutting, get sunlight to the floor, get those fresh tops down so the deer have food to eat. We want to increase the amount of food. And then going into fall, if there's no major changes, no EHD, all of those things, good Lord willing, we will harvest does accordingly. And essentially it's going to be, if you have an opportunity based on our tag system here in Ohio, please take a doe. It's going to kind of be the rule on the farm, and we'll see if we can reduce some of the miles on the landscape, open up some more room on the farm, reduce some social pressure, and also increase the amount of food per mouth for some of those younger, hopefully high-quality bucks in the future. I hope you guys like this. I sure have loved doing this study. Trail cameras versus thermal drones. Wow. Absolutely blown away. If you guys like this stuff, please check us out at vitalizeseed.com.